The trouble is, I don't think you can address arguments coming from people who have only played mainstream RTS titles. Like if you wanted to have an experience playing a single player real time strategy game, single player real time strategy content of any kind that actually challenged you and expected you to play the game, and not in a way where it was like, oh, can you beat all of my spawned waves in question mark? If it was actually trying to compete with your time as a product, you basically had to go play an obscure Brood War mod that was released like 20 years after the Brood War game itself came out. Like, who's doing that? Not very many people. I think maybe Cosmonarchy Brood War had, we'll be generous and say it probably got to triple digits in terms of unique people who played the game, played the mod. But they played it at various times, probably. Some of them maybe played it before the rebrand. Who knows? The point is, that counterexample doesn't exist in most people's minds. They haven't played something that requires you to go up against competent enemies, and they certainly haven't played content like One for the Future, the birthday campaign series, where there's even transmissions going on, and there's, it's not just what people would say glorified skirmish content. It is actually going to have some sort of imbalanced map scenario, imbalanced team scenario where it's like a 2v1v1 or something crazy, a team free-for-all, stuff like that. They haven't played anything of scale, and they haven't played anything that actually competes for their time. What can you possibly say? What can you possibly provide for them? You basically have to sell them on the argument from the spoken word alone. That's all you can do. Because if you try to take it a step further and say, well, here's an example, I mean, unless they actually want to opt into that experience in the first place, and in Cosmonarchy Brood War's case, it does admittedly involve blocking it from Windows Defender and repairing it from your antivirus and setting up an older version of Brood War. And these aren't really complicated hoops to jump through, but they are still hoops to jump through. Like, at some point, if you want to really change more than just a few people's minds at a time, if you want to provide something where the average consumer could at least check it out and see what you were talking about, I mean, you can't really point to an obscure Brood War mod, unfortunately. You can point to some documentation that only a few people are going to bother reading because they're just simply not invested, which is totally understandable. You can try to sell them on the promise, on the idea, maybe point to some video content of people playing it. But again, unless you can put a product that's easy for them to experience themselves in front of them, you're not really going to be able to sell them on it. And unfortunately, the only product that currently exists, to my knowledge, that actually competes for your time in its single-player content, and isn't just a glorified gimmick simulator. You want to talk about glorified things? That Starcraft II's campaign is a fucking nightmare. It's just non-stop changes of pace and complete changes of stakes and scale, and the writing is obviously off the wall. Like, good luck ever getting invested in a product like that. But you want to have a counterexample to be able to put in front of them. Like, that's what you have to do. And well, you know what? Come back, watch this space, come back in about a year. We'll see what you can do. We'll see. You'll see some things, man. You'll see some things. If I had to change somebody's mind about StarCraft II being the pinnacle of RTS mission design, I would just have them play, I guess, the Brood War campaigns, because they're not really that great, but they are much better than StarCraft II, just by virtue of, like, the developers were actually limited in how many things they could do to fuck the game flow. So, that says a lot. Really, I don't ascribe like value to the experience, but you want to play a better single-player RTS game than StarCraft II, just play its predecessor. Even the Brood War campaigns themselves, which were shit shows, actually had more RTS gameplay in them. And that's the biggest thing, is you can't even say StarCraft II has RTS missions, because it doesn't. It doesn't have RTS gameplay in it. It has gameplay where you cosplay as an RTS player, because, you've got some units and you've got to move them around, and sometimes you got to build more of them, especially on the brutal difficulty. Sometimes you have to build more than 2 units. You have to build 3 units, and that's how you defeat the enemy, because the objectives never involve actually defeating your opponent. In fact, when you move into an enemy base, you get a bunch of transmissions saying, hey, player, Blizzard doesn't want you to be engaging with your opponent because they are a ramshackle piece of shit AI that just has a bunch of pre-play stuff and money, just like every other fan campaign in existence. And we're no better than that. So please don't expose us by wiping the whole map and then still being attacked by Nidus worms and other things that are spawning in, just like our co-op experience, because that would expose us for the frauds we are. Well, this is the No Frauds Club, ladies and gentlemen. We do things a little bit differently around here. We're not interested in making it so that you're discouraged through dialogue and a bunch of pre-play stuff from actually engaging with your opponents. In fact, engaging with your opponents as they engage with you is kind of the whole point of playing a game in the first place, especially a video game, especially a competitive video game, especially a real-time strategy game. Wow, who would have thunk it? You're building armies and harvesting resources and fighting against AI that are doing the same thing while also having approximations of who those AI are as characters, talking to you and bantering with you and laughing at you when they kill your expansion and maybe swearing at you when you kill their expansion. Wow, it's almost like there's really easy ways to immerse the player in the experience without even having that much dialogue, and certainly without having a bunch of gimmicks that only exist to distract you from the hollowness of the experience. Think about how much dialogue is in the average Starcraft II map, dude. Think about how many transmissions populate your ears and pull focus away from the gameplay you are currently engaging in. Oh yeah, there's a lot of them. And the reason being is entirely because nobody has any idea at Blizzard how to do anything without looking at a spreadsheet and figuring out how many resources worth of units they should pre-place in this area to achieve the desired playtime for their mission. It is a hollow experience. There is no replay value. There's no play value to begin with. It's literally just a bunch of static shit waiting to be A-moved. And, well, StarCraft II does A-moving pretty well with all of its pathfinding stupidity. But you know what? It's really not all it's sliced up to be, is it, homie? I don't even think you can scout and stir the pre-placed hives, Knight of the Realm. I don't even think that's possible. I think what happens is you try to scout around, your unit gets killed because it's a scout, and you're scouting probably with like a worker or a low tier unit or something, and you're walking into like siege tanks and ridiculous numbers of pre-placed units, and then you're told to go fight Amon. Well, Amon is a void, and there's a void in the gameplay too. I don't know if you knew that.